Hi, good day everyone. Welcome to this lecture for CPOD and CPOR. So I'm going to start going through the study material, and you should please familiarize yourself and go through the material as we go through it. I'm going to try and pace ourselves or everyone so that we can cover as much work as we possibly can. And what's nice about these recordings is you will be able to go and watch them again. So I'm just going to go through these, and please make sure, as a starting note, that during the year, the items that I'm highlighted as important will be your scope for the year. So please make sure that you go through this material and the lectures, and it gives you quite good tips on the stuff that I'm going to ask during the exam and tests. So without further ado, let's start with our topic 1 or chapter 1, the construction industry, Cook and Williams. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction lecture, is this first 2 units aren't that important for later on, although we're going to focus on it a little bit this at the beginnings, just to give you a bit of a background of how the construction industry works and how it fits into each other. So the distance learning students will understand much of these items because you're already in the industry. So some of the information might be items that you're already familiar with. Okay, so we're going to look at chapter 1 of Cook and Williams. And this unit we're going to look at particularly just defining what the construction manager is and what the CPM is, and define the construction industry. Okay, so it incorporates quite a bit of other industries as well. So like mining, for instance, has a lot of construction in it, the production industry, etc., etc. So we're going to particularly look at the industry structure, okay, and then some culture. We're going to look at the Egan report and the Latham report, etc., which will give you a bit of background of what the construction industry looks like and the challenges that we've been grappling with for a long period already. And then we're going to look at, yes, the reports that I just mentioned. Okay, so looking at the definitions of the construction manager, firstly, the SACP CMP defines a construction manager as the physical construction process within the built environment, and includes the coordination, administration, management of resources. So you can see it's a bit more the actual construction side, and then the construction manager is the one point of responsibility. So he's the person that manages that process of the actual construction, whereas the construction project manager is the management of projects within the built environment from conception or inception, what do you want to call it, including management of related professional services. Construction project manager is the one point responsible for this regard. Another definition of it to differentiate between the two is the construction manager is usually involved from stage 4 to 6, whereas the construction project manager is involved from stage 1 to 6, and fulfills a consultant type of obligation. Okay, and then the definition from the Construction Regulations 2014, the construction manager means the competent person responsible for the management of physical construction processes and coordination, administration, management of resources on a construction site. Okay, so you can see it's very similar to the SACP CMP's definition. Okay, and then obviously I just included Wikipedia's definition, which will give you a bit of insight, but the construction industry, site managers often referred to as construction managers. Site agents or building managers are responsible for the day-to-day on-site running of construction projects. Site managers are required to keep within the timescale, budget, of a project and manage any delays or problems encountered on site during the construction project. Also involved in the role of managing of quality control, health and safety checks, the inspection of work carried out. Many site managers will be involved before site activity takes place and are responsible for managing communication between all parties within or involved in the on-site development of the project. Site managers are often required to deal with inquiries, communication with public as well. Typically, a site manager is employed by a construction company, contractors or civil engineering firms, but often employed by local authorities to oversee refurbishment of council-owned properties. Okay, so this is just a very broad take, and it also incorporates other areas in the world. You can see a construction manager usually starts out as a site manager and then progresses where he has more than one site and he has a portfolio of sites that he's managing. So it's not, you're not becoming a site manager as such, but you're going to manage a whole lot of sites in the end. So, but usually you start on a site, depending on the size of the project. You can have anything from one site manager to a couple of site managers. Got the seriousness of the construction regulations. I just wanted to highlight this to you. A principal contractor must in writing appoint one full-time competent person as a construction manager with the duty to managing all construction work on a single site, including the duty of ensuring occupational health and safety compliance, and in the absence of the construction manager, an alternative must be appointed by the principal contractor. So the basic thing is you need a professional appointed to take responsibility for the project. Many contractors appoint external professionals to act as the construction manager, and they might have multiple projects underneath their wing. Okay, the construction project management. So yes, I've shown this in our first lecture as well. I've just highlighted how a typical project, doesn't matter whether you're doing design of a new airplane or a software development or whatever. This is more or less how your project looks, where you have your concept initiation, design and development, implementation or construction, and communication and handover. Whereas the construction industry has stages 1 to 2, which is your inception and concept feasibility. We have stages 3 and 4, which is our design and procurement stages. Then we've got our construction or implementation phase, and then we've got our closeout phase, which just feeds into phase 1 and 2, or into one again. So whenever you're doing tenders again, you would pull out a previous project and you will start there looking at possible rates. If you don't have any rates, you will source new rates, do your rate build-ups, etc., etc. So this is more or less how it works, and this is universal for whether you're a professional engineer, whether you're architect, QS, construction manager. Everyone within the South African construction industry uses these 6 stages to actually go and do their work. Okay, so we're going to look at these items. I'm not going to go in too much depth, but basically I'm going to look at the outcomes of each one and give you some examples. So agreeing with the client and preferences, assessing user needs and options, appointment of the necessary consultants in establishing project brief, objectives, priorities, constraints, assumptions, and strategies in consulting with the client. So the basic thing is to get a scope, and that is very difficult sometimes with your client, because much of the time they don't really know themselves what they're looking for. So standard services that a professional provides to the client, the construction project manager. You can go through these, but the outcomes from these sessions is basically you need a project brief, project procurement policy, sign consultant client agreements. Who are you going to appoint? Are you going to need an engineer, mechanical, health and safety consultants? Do you need an architect? Do you need a IT specialist, etc., etc.? Project initiation of program. So you get a master program that you start compiling. We'll still get to the master program. Then record all your meetings. Very important. Approval by the client. This might seem as a given, but many times you don't have signed documents that you can proceed, that they have accepted the documentation that was provided to them, and suddenly they make changes. But this is not what we wanted. We wanted a smaller building, for instance, and so on and so on. Okay, so it's good to have a document that's signed off to proceed to stage 2. Okay, usually in this stage, the most important thing is to establish the scope, as I said, and to establish who the project team would be. Who are you going to appoint on the project? Okay, and this is a typical example of such a program that you can develop. You will see that you have the appointment of a consultant, detailed design. Okay, so this is just more or less gives you an idea. This is one that we did for tender document in 2017, and it just stipulates by when the consultants should be appointed, when the documentation should be ready, when you go out on tender, capital approval. Many clients have capital approval stages. Then you go into construction. You can see it's a very short description of the construction. It only shows that the length of the project, and then when the project should be closed out. So many times in this early stages, the client would say, I want to occupy this building by next year February, or next year July, whatever. And then usually you work backwards from that date and compile your master program that you present to your client. Then we get to stage 2, our concept and viability. So now you basically go through the documentation again. You make sure what the design is, and the information is expanded, etc., etc. So this is basically what is done in the concept and viability. And then you facilitate the approval. The main thing is now, okay, now we're putting meat to the bones and seeing whether the project is actually feasible. Will it fit within the budget? Is the occupation list, does the size of the building actually fit within the budget of the client? Is there enough space? Will it fit? All of those items is clarified. Okay, so very important to read through all of this. And then in particular, you have a new signed consultant clients agreements. This is usually people that come on board at later stages. Now you've established, okay, but we're going to have a big solar installation on this building. Okay, then you might have to appoint a solar specialist, maybe to assist at this early stages, just giving advice, etc., speaking to the electrical engineer, and so on. And then indicative project documentation and construction program. Okay, so now you expand on your program, and then you get approval from your client again. Very important. Stage 2 is basically where the biggest divider between whether this project will go on or not is located. You've done the concept, the architect has done the footprint of the building. You can see what the square meter area is, and the QS can fairly accurately predict or estimate what the final cost of the project would be. You take into account all the fees, etc., and then the client has to see whether that will actually fit within his budget. Okay, and then what I've included is just typical drawings or items that you will get to. This is a project that we did there in Blackrock, and this was just concept. I think this project has continued. I'm not too involved in it anymore, and this is basically what the architect produced. It's just a concept of what this project would entail. This was a small like service center of office spaces that was provided. There was a space for like a tire dealer, a little radio station, health and safety, clothing store, etc., etc. So this was just a small concept that was done, and then the architect provided us with the following details. You can see it's just a footprint of the drawings or the of the layout of the site, and on the site we could establish what the square meter areas were for everything, and from this we could develop a basic estimate. Okay, so this is basically just a summary of that estimate that we did, and this was also at the end of 2017. You can see it's still 14 rand VAT that we had, and then we had the different areas. So we had Toyota spares, Sheck PPE, etc., etc. You can see that the biggest cost was actually the civil works, like the road works that we had in here, and we had also the structured paving, which also contributed quite a lot to the project. I think in the end they actually expanded this project, and it, the last estimate that I saw, it was in excess of 40 million. So, and just a bit of a background on how this process actually works. So the client could say, okay, I have enough money to continue with the project, please proceed to stage 3. Okay, and this is just the measurement work. This was from Dimex that I did it, and you can see it's basically just the square meter areas that we got, and obviously connecting the right grades is also very, very important. Okay, so, and I think I didn't include, there's some, not all of the items are included or shown here, so like the road, etc., but some sections were kept in and others were left out, and so on. And then we get to stage 3, design development. Okay, manage and coordination of the integrated design development. So usually in design development, what happens is, okay, the footprint has been established. Now we start looking at what type of finishes are we going to use. Are we going to use brick and mortar? Is it going to be lightweight steel? Even though you've discussed it in stage 2, maybe it now becomes a reality. Now you start sourcing more info so that you can produce an elemental estimate for your client to get a more accurate design. So again, read through all of this. This is very important, not only for this module, but also for working in the construction industry, so that you know what the outcomes are. Okay, so again, we've got signed consultancy agreements. Anyone that comes on board again, or if anything has to change, if the scope changed maybe, or something like that. Detailed design, documentation, and program. So you update your program to incorporate all of this new information. Maybe you've learned that the procurement process from the client has a certain amount of stages, like stage 1 is maybe the budget approval, then it has to go to someone else for approval. Then you can actually increase the accuracy of that. Update in indicative program, okay, the construction program. So now you start conceptualizing your program a little bit. Now you incorporate, for instance, the civil work should take place first. So you would divide your program into the large items that has to take place. Like for instance, your civil works, water reticulation before you actually break ground for your buildings, etc., etc. But you will not go into details of, okay, now we're doing the strip footing, and now you have to wait 7 days, and now you have to pour the concrete and build up your foundation walls, etc. It just it still is divided into elements and not really items as such. Okay, and then again you have to record all of your meetings, and then you get approval to proceed to stage 4 again. So usually at the end of stage 3 a elemental estimate is produced, so that the client can take a final decision. Okay, we're going to produce the documentation, we're going to go out on tender. We want to go out on tender by this date because the financial year starts and ends at this date. Okay, and this is some typical drawings. You can see now this is a ablution that we did, also there in the Black Rock area, and you can see how much detail is added. So now you start getting a bit more information on the amount of toilets that's going to be installed, just the basic layout and items, that the accommodation of showers, toilets, female, non-female. You're going to have a boiler room to service this entire structure, building. Okay, so you get more information like that. Okay, and then in this instance now you can start playing around with existing mobile. On this project we had a mobile change house that was there, whether we're going to use the mobile as an additional ablution or existing and sectional completion. Are we going to use a certain section of the one, do it in phases, or are we going to demolish the existing mobile and change houses and then just start from scratch, or new to existing and demolition of existing? So the client can now have a look at the different options and make a decision based on the different costs involved. Okay, then we get to documentation and procurement, and I think most of you will be proficient with this because this is what we've done throughout your undergrad degree up to thus far. Looking at the procurement process, this is where all the detail and most of the work is done, so that you have a contractual document and all the information available that can go out on tender. Okay, and then again it's the process of establishing and implementing procurement strategies and procedures, including the preparation of necessary documentation for effective timeous execution of the project. So okay, if this is done right, your project will run smoothly, barring the natural hiccups that you will encounter or challenges that you will encounter. So the contractors, subcontractors and suppliers procurement strategy, how are we going to do it? What type of contractor is it going to be? JBCC, GCC, FIDIC, or whatever contractor it might be. Okay, and then project procurement program is developed. So now you've got a bit more detail, and now you start focusing on going forward from the tender process up to the completion stage. Okay, then the project tender conditions is drawn up. Again, you take a record of all the meetings and you get approval. Make sure that all the drawings and everything is signed off by all the parties. Okay, and then I just added some pictures. This is basically where all the paperwork and administration comes in. Okay, and then we get to our actual implementation, and this is where the construction project manager is very important. You've done all the planning and the procurement, you've gone through all the processes, and now you need to control it. So again, go through all of these items. You will see there's quite a lot of these items. I will also post the Gazette on Blackboard so that you will have access to that. So please make sure that you've got that. And then the outcome at the end is a signed contractors agreement at the start of the project, agreed contract program. Is it resource based? Is it not resource based, etc. Adjustment and award contractual claims, construction documentation schedule. You've got your monthly progress payment certificates, monthly project progress reports. Again, you need to record all your meetings and certificates and practical completion. So very important, your administration is key to all of these items. Simple things like the dates on when drawings are issued. For if the contractor makes a mistake, perhaps on levels, you can see, okay, did he do it according to the drawing? Did he work on the latest drawing or not? Small items like that is very important. So bookkeeping, administration is extremely important on any project. Okay, and then I just added what everyone thinks we do on a project and what we basically do on a project. We discuss items a lot of the times in site meetings. So and you solve a lot of problems. It's actually quite nice to work on these projects because of the challenges that you have to face and address. And I think that's why most of us got into the construction industry. Okay, the main thing is this slide. I just wanted to iterate how important it is to get the scope before the actual project starts, because it's a major difference between the appointment of consultants or the project team when building a typical house like this in comparison of doing a project of this size. So obviously the approach is much different and the cost and the budget will be much higher. Okay, then closeout. Don't forget about the closeout, extremely important, because this is where everything is signed off and you have made sure that everything is correct and where you get your lessons learned that you're going to implement in your next project. So you have your works completion certificate, certificate of final completion, record of all the meetings, project closeout report. Very important, this project closeout report. It just covers yourself, whether the client was actually happy with everything that happened, and that he can that there won't be any comebacks later on. Okay, and then the main thing is arguing on the internet. Yeah, it's pretty much like this. Keep a paper trail. Try and look for solutions rather than showing out mistakes on your project. On your project, and remember that your team and the contractor will probably know the most practical or have a lot of practical experience that you can tap into if you're the consultant. If you're a contractor, please also note that the consultant will give you very valuable information on exactly what the client wants. So be very mindful of each other and don't search for mistakes, rather search for solutions. It's just the easiest on any project. Be proactive and be a team player. Okay, and then documentation is very important. Keep records of everything and compile your reports. Okay, then I just added this video. Then you can have a look at it. Here's the link to watch this video, so please be mindful of that.